You open a hair salon. Someone sits in your chair for 45 minutes, you charge them $60, and whatever's left after you pay the stylist is yours. That's the whole business. Simple. Except it isn't, and the gap between that assumption and what actually happens is where almost every failed salon lives. Here's the number that should stop you. The average hair salon in the United States keeps about 8 cents of every dollar it brings in. Not 8% growth, 8% profit, total, after everything. Rent, payroll, product, insurance, marketing. Run a salon that does $250,000 a year, which is a completely normal mid-sized shop, and you're looking at roughly $20,000 of actual profit for the year. That's before you've paid yourself anything close to a market wage for running the place. Compare that to a typical small business, which averages closer to 8% as well, but in industries with far less physical overhead, and you start to see the problem. Salons aren't underperforming a normal business. They're structurally built to run this tight. So the first thing worth sitting with is this. A full parking lot and a fully booked schedule tell you almost nothing about whether the owner is making money. A salon can look like a hit and still be one bad month away from closing. The income statement and the reception area are telling two different stories, and most people only ever see the second one. To understand why the margins are this thin, you have to understand that hair salon isn't really one business. It's two completely different businesses that happen to share a sign out front. And most people who open a salon don't realize which one they've actually built until the money stops working the way they expected. The first model is the commission salon. This is the version most people picture. The owner employs the stylists or treats them as something close to employees, sets the prices, controls the schedule, and pays each stylist a percentage of what they bring in, typically somewhere between 40 and 60% of the service price. The owner keeps the rest to cover rent, product, utilities, insurance, and hopefully a profit. In this model, the owner is running a labor-intensive service business, and the biggest expense by far is payroll. Add in payroll taxes, workers' comp, and benefits, and labor costs can add another 15 to 25% on top of the base commission. That means before a single haircut generates profit, well over half of what a client pays has already been spoken for.
The second model is the booth or suite rental salon. Here, the owner isn't really selling haircuts at all. They're leasing a chair or an entire private studio to an independent stylist who runs their own business inside it, sets their own prices, keeps their own clients, and keeps everything they earn. The owner's income is the weekly or monthly rent check. This isn't a haircutting business, it's a real estate business that happens to have mirrors in it. Those are two fundamentally different economic engines with different risks, different ceilings, and different failure points, and they've been sold to first-time owners under the same reassuring word, salon. Which one you're actually running determines almost everything else about whether the business survives. Before either model produces a single dollar of profit, though, someone has to pay to build the place, and this is where salons diverge from most small businesses in a way that catches new owners off guard. Opening costs for a modest salon typically start around $25,000 and can run well past $60,000 once you account for plumbing for multiple sinks, ventilation for chemical treatments, specialized electrical for styling tools, and code requirements that a typical retail space doesn't have to meet. This isn't a business you can start in a rented room with a laptop. The physical space is a real, inflexible cost before you've earned a single dollar. And unlike a lot of small businesses, you can't easily downsize a salon's footprint if revenue disappoints. The plumbing is already in the walls. So the owner is now carrying a fixed, expensive space, a workforce that eats more than half of every service dollar, and a profit margin that starts in single digits. Where does anyone actually make real money in this business? The answer surprises most people, including a lot of salon owners early in their careers. It's retail. A haircut typically carries a gross margin somewhere in the 50 to 70% range once you account for the stylist's time and product used during the service. That sounds healthy until you remember its gross margin, not what's left after rent and overhead. Retail product, the shampoo, the styling cream, the color-safe conditioner sold at the front counter, carries a gross margin closer to 55 to 80%. And unlike a service, it doesn't require 45 minutes of a skilled person's time to deliver. A bottle sits on a shelf until someone buys it. Salons that get retail right can push product sales to 30 or 40% of total revenue, and those are consistently the salons with the healthiest overall margins in the industry. This is the part that reframes everything. The haircut isn't really the profit center, it's the appointment. It's the 45 minutes of trust and attention that makes a client willing to buy the product the stylist just used on them. The service is what gets the customer in the chair. The retail shelf is what turns that visit into real margin. A salon owner who treats retail as an afterthought is leaving the highest margin part of the business unsold every single day to every single client who walks out the door. But even a well-run retail counter can't rescue a salon from its biggest and most unpredictable cost, which is people. In a commission salon, payroll isn't just the largest line item, it's the most volatile one. A stylist who's good at their job doesn't just generate revenue for the salon, they generate a following, regular clients who book with that specific person month after month, sometimes for years. That relationship is arguably the most valuable asset in the entire business. And here's the part that should genuinely change how you see this industry. The owner doesn't actually own it. The stylist does.
Client loyalty in a hair salon attaches to a person, not to a building. A client isn't loyal to the salon's address. They're loyal to the person who's cut their hair the same way for 3 years and remembers what happened at their kid's birthday party last time they were in. Which means the single most valuable asset driving repeat revenue can walk out the front door anytime that stylist decides to leave, and in most cases, take a meaningful chunk of the client list with them. This is the domino most new owners never see coming, and it's worth walking through exactly how it plays out because it's a pattern that repeats across the industry constantly. Rent goes up, or a slow season hits, or product costs rise. The owner needs more margin, and there are really only 2 levers available: raise prices or reduce what stylists take home, either by cutting commission percentages or raising booth rental fees. Either move puts pressure directly on the stylists, especially the best ones, because top performers have the most to lose from a pay cut and the most options elsewhere. A talented stylist with a loyal client base is exactly the kind of person a competing salon or a booth rental studio wants to recruit, often with a better split or full independence. So, the best stylist leaves, and they don't leave alone. A meaningful share of their regular clients follow them to the new location because, as established, the loyalty was never really to the salon in the first place. Revenue at the original salon drops, but the fixed costs, the rent, the build-out, the utilities, don't drop with it. The owner is now covering the same overhead with less income, which means either cutting hours, reducing staff further, or accepting thinner margins. Service quality often slips as the remaining team absorbs more clients with less support. That decline pushes even more clients towards stylists who've moved on. One departure doesn't stay one departure. It becomes a slow leak that's very difficult to plug because the thing driving revenue was never fully inside the owner's control to begin with. This exact structural weakness, the fact that a commission salon's most valuable asset can simply walk out the door, is precisely what the second model, the booth and suite rental business, was built to exploit. Over the past 2 decades, the booth rental and private suite model has grown from a niche arrangement into a genuine competitor to the traditional commission salon, and one company's growth traces the shape of that shift clearly. Salon Studios started in 2004 with a small handful of locations and has since expanded to more than 750 locations, housing over 21,000 independent beauty professionals. Its pitch to stylists is direct. Instead of splitting your earnings with a salon owner, pay a flat weekly rent for your own private studio and keep everything you make. For a stylist with an established client base, the math is often dramatically better than staying in a commission arrangement. And for the person running the building, it's not a hair business at all. It's a landlord business, with tenants who happen to be stylists. This model doesn't eliminate the risk that used to sit with a salon owner, it just relocates it. The suite operator doesn't have to manage payroll, doesn't lose revenue if one tenant has a slow month, and doesn't need to replace a departing stylist's client base because that client base was never the operator's asset to lose. The tenant absorbs the volatility of building a clientele. The building owner just needs the suites occupied. It's a cleaner, more predictable business, precisely because it stops pretending to be in the haircutting business and admits it's in the real estate business. That distinction is the counterintuitive core of this entire topic. The traditional commission salon looks like the more complete business: services, retail, staff, brand, but it's carrying the operational risk of running people while depending on an asset, client loyalty, that legally and practically belongs to someone else. The booth rental model looks thinner and less ambitious, but it's economically cleaner precisely because it never tries to own something it can't actually keep. Most of the industry hasn't fully split into one camp or the other. It's adapted into hybrids.
A lot of salons now run mixed structures. Some employed stylists on commission for consistency and brand control, alongside independent booth renters who bring in guaranteed rental income regardless of how busy they are that week. Retail has moved from an afterthought to a deliberate strategy, with staff trained to recommend a product at the end of every appointment, because that recommendation is often more profitable than the appointment itself. Membership and subscription pricing has crept in too, locking clients into recurring monthly payments for services like blowouts or maintenance color, which smooths out the feast or famine cash flow that used to define slow weeks.
So what does actually owning a hair salon look like, honestly, once you strip away the parking lot full of cars? In the best case, a well-run, well-located salon with strong retail sales and low staff turnover can push net margins into the 15 to 17% range, turning a few $100,000 of revenue into meaningful annual profit. Genuinely one of the better outcomes in small business ownership, and proof that the model can work extremely well when every lever is pulled correctly. In the realistic, more typical case, an owner is running at that industry average 8% margin, earning somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000 to $80,000 a year once they factor in paying themselves. A real income, but one that's arrived at only after carrying significant financial risk, unpredictable staffing, and a physical space that can't easily flex if things slow down. In the failure case, the one that plays out constantly and quietly across the industry, margins slide toward 2 to 5% or lower. Rent stays fixed. A key stylist leaves and takes clients with them. Retail never becomes a real strategy. The owner is working full-time to keep a business alive that's barely breaking even, propped up by the appearance of activity rather than the reality of profit, a full chair, an empty bank account. So you might assume that owning a hair salon is a business built around cutting hair. It isn't, not really. It's a business built around 3 much harder problems: holding on to physical space with almost no flexibility, retaining the loyalty of the specific people who actually generate revenue, and finding margin in the parts of the business, retail, rent, recurring memberships, that don't depend on a stylist's chair being full every single hour of the day. The haircut is what gets someone through the door. Everything that determines whether the owner actually makes money happens after that.